Good afternoon. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Thursday, August 3rd, 2023. It is 3:03 p.m. The session is set to go until 4 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110 for public virtual attendance. You may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. Vice Chair Ty Menser is in the boardroom. Commissioner Gary Edwards is in the boardroom as well, and we're going to be discussing CR-1 Natural Landmark Program briefing.
So just a quick comment. If anything, something to feel good about this is this particular items, at least from my humble point of view. So staff is going to walk you through the options, because this has been in the works. Is initiated by a particular citizen. This particular citizen has been waiting for this item to come before you. So I believe from staff point of view, we're happy to bring this matter for your consideration.
Thank you, County Manager. That's pretty much exactly what I was going to say. I'm Joshua Cummings, the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development. Here to present, we have Brian Benjamin, Associate Planner, as well as Andy DeFobis, Senior Planner on the team, and Tasha Knight taking notes. Just as the County Manager stated, this is one of those items that initiated by a citizen from their perspective to help with protection in our community. Our staff, as directed by the Board of County Commissioners, has prioritized this as a docket item to proceed. We're excited to have Brian aboard, and I'll let him take it away from here. Go for it, Brian.
Share the presentation online. Just give me a second.
Just for the record, introduce yourself and your position, please.
There you go, you're up.
All right, I'm gonna test the slides. Okay, it's working. All right, thank you, County Manager Chavez and Director Cummings. Good afternoon, Chair Mejia and members of the board. For the record, I'm Brian Benjamin, Associate Planner with the Community Planning Division. Today's briefing will address ongoing work on a Development Code Amendment proposal, Citizen Request Number 1, or CR-1 Natural Landmark Program. I would like to take an opportunity as we start today's briefing to introduce myself, as this is my first appearance before the board. I started with community planning in March, where I primarily work on water-related projects, but also contribute to docket items as well.
To what?
Docket items.
Docket items.
I'll start today's briefing with an overview of the topics covered in the presentation. We will review background information and an overview of the proposal, find the issues we would like the board to provide direction on, review options according to staff analysis, and review possible timelines for next steps. As you can see on this slide, we will be using terms like the proposal or the proposed code amendment throughout the presentation. And I would just like to clarify that these terms are used to refer to the applicant's proposal for a new conservation program. So whenever we're seeing that language or hearing me speak that language, that's what we mean referring to the applicant's proposal.
Just as a matter of course, since this is your first time in the room, the speaker is here, so to have your voice picked up, aim your voice towards that direction if possible.
Okay, yeah,
You're doing great.
Moving on to background information, the proposed development code amendment was added to the final docket in 2022. The proposal details code changes that would establish a new voluntary conservation program called the Natural Landmark Program, which offers voluntary protection to properties that may contain natural, historic, and landscape features. The proposed code amendment is to Chapter 20, Zoning of Thurston County Code, and describes operation and enrollment criteria of the program, which would allow landowners to enroll property that they feel contains scientific, cultural, landscape, or historic value that may not be recognized under the enrollment criteria of existing programs. The proposal also identifies that removal of the property from the program would include a $5,000 penalty. The overarching goal of the proposal is to create a lower barrier option for protecting property than existing conservation programs currently offer. The language of the proposal identifies development pressure as the primary factor in justifying a new program, since lands that are not eligible to enroll in existing conservation programs do not have access to the county's voluntary protections. Examples of land that may be excluded from current conservation frameworks include properties containing less than 2 acres or disconnected groups of mature trees. It is important to highlight that there are a variety of existing voluntary mechanisms by which landowners can protect their property. The county maintains 3 programs directly related to the scope of the proposal. First, the Open Space Tax Program, which offers protections to smaller properties with qualifying features under the public benefit rating system. These would be features like critical habitat or archaeological resources. There's also the Conservation Futures Program, which offers permanent preservation opportunities by allowing landowners the opportunity to sell property or development rights to the county that are then held by a conservation organization. Finally, there are local, state, and federal historic registers, which allow for a variety of property types, structures, and natural features of historic value to be identified and protected from future development. These 3 county programs could be used today to protect the resource types identified by the applicant's proposal. The key difference is that review and eligibility for these programs have higher standards for enrollment than the proposed natural landmark program, which relies on a determination made by a property owner. In addition to county programs, a 4th option for protecting the types of properties that are identified in the proposal is available through private conservation easements, which protect land by limiting future development of a property. The conservation easement approach is currently available to any landowner interested in conservation and does not require county involvement. Considering the goals of the proposal and the existing mechanisms available to landowners to protect property, there are 3 potential approaches that may substantially meet the intent of the proposed amendment. First, to proceed in establishing a new voluntary conservation program modeled on the Natural Landmark Program, which is the applicant's request. Then, to amend existing conservation programs to lower perceived barriers to enrollment. And lastly, to rely on protections as they exist today, since the resource types identified in the proposal fall within the purview of existing conservation tools. The first option would create a voluntary conservation program from scratch, informed by the applicant's proposed language, with some additions to flesh out administrative protocols, clarified language for inclusion in county code, other clerical changes, and conformance with the comprehensive plan. This first option could represent small properties with features that are not protected under the county's existing conservation frameworks. Policies in the county's comprehensive plan appear to support new voluntary protections when contributing to issues like water availability and quality, urban open space, and stormwater management. Some adjustments to the scope of the proposal may be needed, as a new program should be able to demonstrate clear connection to these objectives and overall alignment with the comprehensive plan. Additionally, establishing a new program would require substantial staff time to develop defensible eligibility criteria as well as administrative processes like developing application materials, maintaining a registry of enrolled properties, assessing penalties for removing of a property from the program, and establishing an ongoing enforcement schedule. Further, conservation programs benefit from corresponding to supporting or authorizing state and federal legislation to justify conservation actions, as these legislative frameworks provide a defensible nexus between the action and public benefit. The proposed Natural Landmark Program does not correspond to a piece of supporting legislation, and none was identified in the initial staff analysis of the proposal. And finally, public demand for a new conservation program is unknown. The second option identified by staff may substantially meet the applicant's request by amending existing programs to allow for enrollment of a wider variety of properties. This option would not require implementation of new regulations or programs, and potential amendments to existing programs would need to operate within the limits of state and/or federal criteria defining enrollment eligibility. Working within legislative frameworks helps ensure defensible and appropriate nexus to public benefit, but may not offer landowners the same ability to enroll properties into county protections under their own volition, as recommended by the applicant's proposal. Substantive review would be necessary to determine the extent to which existing programs could be amended, but the comprehensive plan appears to support relaxing enrollment criteria to achieve certain objectives. Additionally, administration of amended programs would rely on existing processes the CPED staff and other responsible review boards and commissions have experience with. Staff time would be incurred to draft amendments, but is already allocated for implementation of existing conservation programs through fees in the general fund. Amendments to existing conservation programs may affect other departments and would require further review before changes could be made by the board. Again, public demand for amendments to existing conservation programs is unknown. The third option factors in the coverage of existing mechanisms available to property owners to protect the types of resources that are identified in the proposal. Extending protections to properties that do not meet the criteria of existing mechanisms may not have an appropriate appropriate nexus to public benefit. This option relies on existing conservation mechanisms unchanged. As identified earlier in the presentation, the county operates a suite of voluntary protections available for properties, and properties that do not meet the criteria for protection under those existing frameworks may offer limited public benefit if placed in conservation status. The comprehensive plan includes goals and policies that appear to encourage exploration of new conservation actions and expansion of existing programs, but the scope of the applicant's proposal does not directly align to those goals and policies. While this third option would forego exploration of changes to current conservation frameworks for now, the scope of the proposed natural landmark program does not present an opportunity to directly address the specific objectives called out by the comprehensive plan. Deferring to available county programs and private options like conservation easements would allow CPED staff to focus on other ongoing projects. The timeline for option 1 includes ongoing research and development of a new conservation program through the end of this year. In 2024, staff would bring deliverables forward for Planning Commission and/or board review, with final action and implementation late in 2024 or 2025. The new conservation program would entail ongoing implementation on a permanent basis. The timeline for option 2 is similar to option 1, with ongoing research and development of amendments to existing programs through the end of this year. In 2024, staff would bring deliverables forward for board review with final action and implementation in late 2024 or 2025. Implementation would continue on a permanent basis, but rely on procedures of current rules. If option 3 is selected, review of the docket item would continue this summer and no further changes would be necessary. To conclude, staff is requesting board direction on the scope of continuing work on the Natural Landmark Program. Is it the board's wish for staff to establish a new voluntary conservation program, amend existing conservation programs, or make no change and rely on existing conservation mechanisms? Staff is requesting direction from the board by August 15th. Thank you for your attention on the presentation. Feel free to reach out to me with questions about the proposal with the contact information here on the slide.
Thank you. Okay, questions? Can we start sharing the slide, please? Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, go ahead.
So this is kind of designed to deal potentially with a multitude of different properties. I guess is the way I'm looking at it. Although there was one specific request that brought this about. Could you refresh me on that request? What was that request? A tree or a stand of trees or
Yeah,
property or?
the applicant that submitted this development code amendment proposal has a piece of property with a stand of trees, stand of mature trees on his property. The property's already developed and is about 1 acre in size, so it doesn't fit squarely into our, and also those trees are disconnected from any known habitat features that would warrant inclusion in the open space tax
And
program.
what kind of trees? What are
They appear to be fir, but I don't know if that's the extent.
they? Have we seen pictures of them?
Yeah, by and large, they appear to be Douglas fir.
Are they, is the property, I mean, do we have a picture of the property here?
Is the applicant in the room?
Mr. Jacobson's here. Oh. Do we have some?
I didn't bring any pictures, I didn't know I was supposed to.
Oh,
Okay.
you weren't supposed to do anything. No, that's
What kind of
just,
trees are they?
Well, they're down, okay, what's very interesting with this property, it's dominated by
Sir, can you introduce yourself just
Lawrence
again?
Jacobson, co-owner of this property, 9347 Case Road. Okay, let's talk about the trees first. So the main thing you would notice is Douglas fir, but underneath the Douglas fir is native dogwood as well. It's kind of an interesting group of things, and there's a little, I think there's one or two little maples, and there's native rhododendrons, and a lot of other things that are there, native little plants, like I don't even know them. And so it's a beautiful thing to see, but it also represents my wife's childhood, because she lived on 93rd, and I've lived here 50-something years myself. And it was gone from a rural little gravel road into storage warehouses, you know, that are, I don't want to say anything too horrible about them, but they're horrible. And we've seen the Case Road turned into something, well, there's I can't remember the person's name, but they were from Germany, and they built this Bavarian chalet, and they had beautiful trees around it. It was like only an acre. And the next owner just took all the trees down. And I've had a lot of people like what I did, you know, so I came to put up a sign. I tried all the traditional ways. So that's this piece, if I had to put a sign on there, I would say this is what it, you know, used to be. My wife and her cousins used to run down where the freeway was going to be, and there were all kinds of flowers, and nothing exists like that anymore. But lilies, like avalanche lilies and things like that. All these things are gone now. And if you got somebody willing to do something about it and willing to put it up, I was just trying to do something, because if I say what I think, I feel those trees talk to me. That's how I came up with it. You know, I don't know, that some little piece should be saved, you know, in this area, this neighborhood. Also a very dry soil, because they have to go 200 feet for water. And then across the street to the north is a very wet area. So it's kind of nice to preserve this and let kids see what the place used to look like. Did I answer your question?
look, kind of, you're talking about 1 acre of property.
Yes.
And is it close at all to any residences or other property or potential residence?
Well, there's a residence on the acre.
You live on that acre?
No, I have a rental unit.
Pardon?
Rental unit.
Oh,
That came about because I realized that if I didn't drill my well, this is back in 1990, and put in my drain field, I wasn't going to ever be able to, because the way it was kind of moving along to that. And so I thought, how can I preserve this and make money, you know, pay my taxes? And that's how I came to get a rental unit on it.
what's gonna happen to the rental on a property like this?
Nothing, in my mind. Why, I mean, it's sitting in an open space. I don't have a board, but if the property is here looking from the road, where people live, and then the other part is here, there's nothing to keep it from continuing to go on as is and be a home for, you know, little birds that fly by, and it's not connected to other habitat, but
How does this affect our danger tree ordinance, for an example, or danger trees in general? where we feel we're obligated to take down dead trees because they might fall on the homes.
Probably not, because this is
Yeah.
private property.
Yeah, it's,
This is private property. What I'm hearing is that perhaps you would like to preserve this property as is
yes, we just want to.
in the long term. And the preservation of this property doesn't fit within the existing categories of open space, conservation features,
No,
or
no.
any historic heritage. So there is a little bit of a gap. There is a desire to preserve this property in the
Yeah.
long term. And really, there is not an avenue at this point on the existing conservation programs that we have that fits the criteria.
No, believe me, I've tried all this stuff.
I understand. So that is really the issue. So whether the board really like to take this and create another option for citizens, residents like you,
Yes.
to come and preserve those properties on their own will.
Is this like,
Voluntary.
I mean, is it like, I'm trying to think, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how this fits, you know, like, it sounds like a conservation easement. So is this, but you know, usually you give that to somebody like Capital Land Trust and they'd want the property, but maybe this is too small and they have no need. So now, are we is it sort of like, is the idea that he basically gives us the conservation rights and we sort of hold those? Is that what's happening here, or?
So a couple things. Is there a tax shift and what does the protection look like?
There's no tax shift proposed in the proposal that we received. And the protection is a fee penalty if withdrawn from protection status. So it's a,
Right, it's really to prevent this property from developing.
But
Right.
you own it, so you
You know,
can make sure it's not.
the county doesn't take ownership of this property. It's like the open space, the county doesn't take ownership of the open space, you just allow the existing property owner, for instance, to put an open space.
Who would own the easement?
There is not an easement, there is an easement, there is not an easement.
What's the legal prevention from development?
Because for instance, open space, you have applicants who come and apply for open space. And in this case, if the board approves that application for an open space, the property owner has a tax break.
Right, exactly.
If that property owner likes to sell that property and develop it other than the open space, they have a penalty of paying
Right.
taxes 7 years.
But that basically puts an easement on the title. Because if they sell it, there's something about, that's recorded on the title that, protects the land, if you will. So what happens in this program?
Similar,
So,
you protect the property as is and prevents from somebody to come and develop it if he sells it. So if somebody comes over, buys this property, try to develop it, there is a penalty to take it out of this
Yeah.
landmark easement. Conservation.
That's the
just
5,000.
be a
I
recorded
put higher
document
one, but-
with the auditor?
I think that's what we're thinking, is that you would apply for this program,
Whatever it takes to do it,
it's
that's.
voluntary, and then a recording on the,
Yeah, you put it,
Every
Cost
time.
someone $5,000 to,
he says he wanted to make it higher.
50,000 at least, something, that's a penalty, $5,000 in 10 years would be worth 1,000 the way we're having
think
inflation.
This all goes back to the considerations Brian mentioned under option one, where if the board elected to go this route, all of this would need to be researed,
Okay.
vetted,
right.
with a full
That's
proposal
what
brought
we'd be
back.
figuring out.
Yes, exactly, correct.
Seems
The
bad.
thing is, thank you, if I may. Option one is to be very onerous because it's creating a brand new program. There's gonna be a lot of administrative effort. But option two seems to achieve the objective by just enhancing the existing conservation programs that we have and allowing this to come in. And without much of administrative,
which program?
Yeah, where would you,
either, I think
space
it's
tax, conservation features?
the pro to conservation features.
Oh.
I've just thrown that there, I mean, because that's option two, is your option.
I mean, this is weird, like, he owns the development rights. It seems like, you know, like with water rights, you can bank them, you can donate them, and this is like, I don't know anyone, I mean, it seems like he just needs to give away this thing that he has and then it's extinguished. It's out of the control of the future buyer. He's reducing his own, the asset, he's reducing the value of his asset when he sells it, cause somebody can only use it for what you're using it for, but that sounds like what he wants to do.
It's almost like a private deed restriction is another avenue to explore. It's, then the question comes back to who's enforcing that. If the property is sold, there's a deed restriction, who's holding and monitoring that? So that's a potential option.
So there is a potentially a long-term burden on the county to monitor if these were ever sold. Or,
I gotta ask a question here. Is there any chance that this could be turned, one of these conservations won't take it, just groups, right? Because it's too small. Do you have anybody that you could put it in a will or something, donate it to the county for a park?
I have children.
What's that?
I said, part of this is my children don't wanna have grandchildren. And so what happens when they're gone?
Well, I mean, can't you stipulate that it can't be changed in use, or tear the house down, for an example, make a nice, really pristine piece of, that's what you want, is a pristine piece of property to stay, and put a blemish on the title and file it with the auditor that nothing can be done for 500 years, I don't know, and put a trust in place to pay the taxes and all that. No?
I don't know, for me, that's too complicated.
Well, but what you're asking, I believe, I'm not against this. This sounds like this could be getting pretty complicated. If we try to get this done, I almost hesitate asking how much staff time we've got in on this. But if we're gonna do all that research and stuff that leads up to a maybe, who's paying for that? Is that the taxpayers in general? Are we picking winners and losers and favoritism at this point? I mean,
No, I think in this case, the board has been responsive. Right. For a citizens initiated document. And that's what you approve in the docket item to staff to work on this. Now you have been responsive to, as in this particular citizens initiated, as many other citizens initiated. So here we are. I mean, the staff has delivered at this point what the board has mandated. And here are the options for you to consider. Option 1, option 2, and option 3. And each one has a administrative
ups
burden.
and downs.
You know, and whether you want to go with option 1, the catalog, and there's a lot of administrative costs associated with that in time. You like to go with option 2, that you could explore amending some of the existing conservation programs that can fit this particular request. No much of administrative burden because those programs are already in place. Or option 3, do nothing.
Just seems like, they always talk about how, your property ownership is like a bundle of sticks, right? And the development rights are a few of those sticks. And it seems like they're your sticks. You should be able to burn up a few of those sticks, and I just don't know the legal mechanism to do that. And then you wouldn't have to worry about what happened in the future because those sticks don't exist anymore. That can't be developed. I mean, it's just.
I don't, my concern is that Mother Nature's gonna change things. The trees are gonna die eventually. What's gonna happen? Who's gonna be responsible for taking a dead tree down that might fall on somebody? Is the public gonna have access to this? It's gonna be completely private forever, gonna put a fence around it. Somebody living in the house, after you're gone, somebody's in the house and they're worried about it, they're gonna take trees down.
You would take the tree down if it was gonna go. A house is far enough away that most trees wouldn't be a threat to.
Well, that's not, firs get as tall as like 200 feet, not uncommon for a, and 1 acre is 200 by 200. I'm trying to think where the house sits, that a tree, as it grows and matures, and you mentioned dry soil, you have to go down 200 feet for water.
Yeah, 100, something like that.
what, and now we're getting into drier, warmer climate, and that's stressing trees out. Lots of trees are dying. So now several start dying. Now we've got a threat of the tree falling down. It's a danger tree. If we don't take it down because we've put this in place, and it goes down and kills somebody, who's responsible? You're deceased by then, cause you aren't no spring chicken and neither am I, so. So I'm just trying to think of a logical process that we could put in place. I'm not trying to be rough about it, but I'm trying to be a realist about it, so.
And I guess that will be the options that you may consider.
But being we've got this, and Brian's done all this work on it, let's go ahead and, okay, we've got this presentation. We're not gonna make a decision today.
No, well,
And it did, but it kind of bothered me. I saw something about we need to, what did we need? We needed a decision by
And that's the
decision on the options.
August 15th.
Decisions of the options,
Oh, okay.
just on the options.
And we're always working towards
I'm
moving
gonna
docket items.
suggest, this is pretty complicated stuff. And that we take the information presented by Brian and staff and set a discussion time when and maybe we can have the person that's proposing this come to that. This is a very unusual process that we've evolved into today. And maybe look at it. I'm not against it, but I wanna study this and ask a few people about liability exposure. You talk about, I'm on the insurance risk pool. I can see all kinds of insurance risk issues involved in this issue. And it's my responsibility to watch out for the citizens of the county in that regard. That's my fiduciary responsibility, if you will. So I'm gonna say, we can discuss this, but this isn't, I don't know, we don't have enough time to figure this out today.
So Commissioner, if I may, this, as the county manager opened, this is an opportunity for us as staff to respond to the board's docketing item. This is a citizen-initiated request. Our staff has done the very best that we can to discern what the citizen is asking for. And so the decision point, we're not pushing you into an August 15th deadline. This is just our continued effort to support the board's direction to move items along at a pace that clears the docket. So that's the first thing. Second thing, the board can have as much conversation on this as possible. We think we've gotten to a point where that direction is how far down into creating a program. This is a general fund topic. This is funded by the general fund. So yes, taxpayers are footing the bill of Brian Benjamin's staff time and this conversation. So the point of the decision is how far down you want us to go in creating a program or adjusting our current programs, or to not proceed further. And that's really the decision point for the board. So the board has made the decision to put it on the docket. The staff got to a place where we're as far as we can in understanding what the item is. And now it's up to the board to tell us how much further to go in using the general fund and exploring this topic of standing up potentially a new program.
Have you done any legal review with the prosecutor's office on
If
this?
the board would like us to, that is exactly the decision to make. We don't know
Okay,
which way to.
that's something we can decide later on,
So
okay.
for instance, if the board provides direction to explore option 2, just for talking purposes, that doesn't bind the board in approving the results of the exploration. It's not like you're just approving something that you don't, it's just giving the direction to further explore any particular option, except for 3. If the board decides in option number 3, the train stops right now, right?
Okay.
Keep going. Options are keep going. Go deep, go medium, or stop going.
I mean, it would be interesting, and I don't know how you would get at it, right? Because I think something that would be that you've noted in the presentation a couple of times, there's no way of knowing. You're creating a program, but you don't know what the market is. And that's the challenge for, a proposal that's very, very specific. And then you try to create a framework around it to not only deal that with, but potential other ones. But we have no idea how many other ones there could potentially be.
Yeah,
Right, and
yeah,
that's
it opens the door,
Yeah,
so to
but that
speak.
is a good point, because, you know, encourage the board to never implement policy to address one specific example.
Right.
And that this may be one specific example and never another one. And that's,
Okay, well,
that we don't.
Madam Chair, I guess I'm gonna try and move this along, that,
Well,
we do need more discussion if we're gonna even contemplate doing so.
so like kind of where I'm at, I'm interested. For me, either with option one or kind of option two. I think for me, right, like option three and just doing nothing, it's kind of defeats the whole purpose of even kind of adding this onto our docket anyways. Um, for me, I would like to explore kind of like what this program, I understand it is staff time but again, we added this onto the docket for a reason. I mean, when we added this to the docket, we had discussion about it and the proposal was laid out. So I'm just, I guess, struggling to understand the surprise, but, so that's kind of where I'm at. And so,
You say, Madam Chair, that you're not interested on option three.
no, I mean, I'm not interested in not doing, anything and just relying on existing protections and conservation programs. I mean, they obviously did not work for the applicant, right, when he applied for this or when he looked into this, so. But I know that a decision, from what I heard, Josh is not requested today. So maybe, if the board needs more information, we can have like another briefing where a decision is requested. Not sure kind of where board members are at.
No, I was just gonna say, I think part of what I think staff needs is some direction to start to explore one or two. If three is off the table, what level of lift do you want to direct staff to explore? Because then they'll have to suss out a whole bunch more in terms of the program. And so I don't know when that would come back. And so but that doesn't preclude there being an option three down the road, because by the time you figure out sort of how could this be structured and some legal analysis, it may come back saying X, Y, or Z.
Just not practical. I mean, I just don't see how we can even come close to, without counsel here telling us, yeah, we better have civil take a look at this and see what the long-term liability exposures are. I wouldn't want to ask staff to do a bunch of work on this and then go to council and say, well, what's going to happen? And they say, well, you're stuck with this for indefinitely if you do this, and we're going to be violating some of the conditions of the applicant's request, i.e. taking down a tree. Is it gonna take it down if it's dead? So I'd like to see something done, but I think we need to have some legal and insurance considerations as well before we just absolutely say, oh, no, we're not, you're done. I'd like to find out a little more about this. That's gonna take some time.
Good question. If I or somebody else owns this property and if they have the manufactured home, they may decide to move it, keep it, aren't they responsible if they're not taking care of that area?
Well, what happens when you're gone? That's the problem.
The world will go on.
Yeah, it'll go on, and the liability may shift to the county, and that's what I'm concerned
Say, why would it necessarily, let's say that you bought it, well, or some kinfolk here bought it, and they now own the manufactured home, which is, paying for all the taxes, plus a little income. And then you see a dead tree, which we've had that happen, when we took part of it down, left the rest for birds. I mean, it wouldn't be any different than if I had a dog and and the dog got out and it bit somebody, that's my fault, right? So this would be the same thing, I mean, it's kind of not, it's much more simple. I mean, I own the land, my wife actually owns it. And then it would just be that if I didn't even have this already sorted out in my mind and the tree falls and hits the property and I didn't do due diligence, then I'd have a default, right?
But you're gonna be gone pretty quick. Are you gonna put together a financial fund to indemnify the county so that we have no liability ever?
What would be I'm trying to say, why does liability even come into it if
Because once you're gone, who's taking care of it?
the next owner?
The next owner.
Well, I have to say, Madam Chair, I don't think we ought to make a decision. And I wanna honor your request of looking at it, but boy, there's a lot of unknowns here.
So we've got one commissioner that has removed do nothing, and another commissioner that wants more information. Any thought, Commissioner Minzer, on what next steps?
So I'm kind of in a different position. I'm willing to move forward with exploration of this, I just wanna know, I wanna check with legal counsel I wanna make sure this is the only option. I mean, cause it seems to me like there'd be a better option to deal with this. So if Travis, it has that expertise to be able to look at it and say, no, what this guy wants to accomplish, the only way it could be accomplished is through the county creating something like this, then I'm willing to look at that. But I just scratch my head and think, how could there not be transfer of development right, a donation of an easement, some other mechanism that would get him actually more protection than what this is gonna give?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
And be like, keep government out of it and be more locked down. But if legal says, nope, none of that's gonna work for him, only this would work, then I'd like to see I'd like to look more closely. And I would also be curious if any other county has had a program. I mean, are we making this up out of whole cloth, or is anyone, anywhere? I don't know if you've had a chance to look around,
We
Brian.
did not identify a similar program that
Okay.
operated under the volition of a property owner. So typically, there are programs that allow for enrollment of quantifiable resources on the property. So you go through an application and review process. The assets on the property are documented and measured against local, state, or federal criteria, and then they're available to be protected. We were not able to replicate any program like what's being proposed that has, I'm a property owner, I would like to enroll this in voluntary protections, and that's the standard by which enrollment will occur.
And not to quibble, but just for the record, staff is not creating this. This is a response to a citizen's request.
Did I say something different?
That we're making this up out of whole cloth.
No, that we would be making,
No, it's
that
a
the
whole new
commissioners would be
program.
asking you to make it up out of whole cloth.
Check, roger that.
That's what I meant.
Thank
That
you.
will be option one.
That would be option
That's
one.
Yeah, and there's
And we-
nothing, there's no other program to import or
Got it, thank you.
model on.
I'm wondering how much we're gonna spend on developing this, at taxpayer expense. That's what I'm kind of looking at, but I know once in a while, when a developer comes in and wants to do X, they've actually had to pay to play, so to speak, and I wonder if that isn't appropriate here. I'm really stymied by how much effort the county taxpayers can put in versus the benefit the county taxpayers will get. Now, if it was gonna be public park area, okay, there's benefit. But if it's just there, we've got thousands of acres up in Capitol Forest we're trying to protect right now. And we're using taxpayer money to do that. This is a private parcel that we're not even gonna be having any real control over other than, so I don't know, are we spending public dollars wisely at this point in time? So I just wanna put this on hold for now until we can get a few of the questions, mainly like Commissioner Menzer asked. We get a couple of those legal questions answered, then we can relook at it. We're not locked into making any decision right now at all, I don't think.
No, I mean, that's the latitude of the, of the board for sure, whatever you like to do with this. But, addressing the investment of taxpayers' dollars to do this, right?
Yeah.
And it's really the direction of the board when you added this item on the docket. And that is the direction you as a board provided to staff to work on this docket item. So staff never came up with this item and spent taxpayers' money willy-nilly. It's the direction of the board, and here we are.
Yeah, so the Board of County Commissioners are spending it
Well, but
willy-nilly.
they reverse that in a way, because you as a Board of County Commissioners have been responsive to the request from a citizen to look into this matter.
Yes.
As you're responsive, I mean, you're just going through the many citizens initiative elements that you go on a yearly basis, what to include, what not to include on the docket. You decided to include this item because it's been in the books for a while.
Being as we spent this money, why don't we just put this on hold right now?
That's
Until we hear a little more, we have a little time to digest it, discuss it with the applicant, find out a few things that might be going on. We're not in any hurry. And maybe in a couple weeks, we can bring it back and talk about it at the table again.
So Commissioner Edwards, I think Commissioner Mintzer, I think I can commit to that conversation with our internal legal counsel about any other potential mechanisms that might satisfy the citizen initiated request without going further down on the programmatic piece of it. So during that interim, while we are exploring some of those other options, I can commit to having that conversation with legal counsel as well. And it's a balance, because obviously our internal legal counsel can't provide legal advice to external parties, but we can explore if there are other potential mechanisms that could be provided for that citizen to explore on their own.
And then I think Commissioner Edwards has a different set of questions about liability. And I don't, so that would be worth bringing back at the same time, so we could just move forward or not. That's the only thing I really need to hear.
Madam Chair.
I mean, two commissioners have requested more information from our attorney, so I guess that is the direction that staff was looking for.
Perfect.
Okay, it is 3:50. If there are no more comments or questions, we're adjourned.